Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if everyone gets obsessed with Deku and Harem. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The sun was a generous patron to Muzurifu that Saturday, bathing the city in the kind of warm, buttery light that made even the most mundane weekend errands feel like a miniature holiday. Laughter from a nearby park spilled into the streets, a pleasant, bubbling soundtrack to the gentle thrum of city life. For Izuku Midoriya, clad in the familiar dark green of his hero costume, this tranquility was the ultimate prize. It was the quiet victory that came after the roaring battles, the peaceful silence that heroes fought to protect. He was on a mentoring patrol with the one and only Mirio Togata, a privilege that still sent a little fizz of excitement through his veins. Mirio, ever the radiant sunbeam of a person, walked with a buoyant stride that seemed to defy gravity, his signature capelet fluttering behind him. "See, this is the good stuff, Midoriya," Mirio said, his voice a booming wellspring of optimism. He gestured with a wide, sweeping arm at the scene around them, a mother laughing as her toddler chased a flock of pigeons, a group of teenagers sharing headphones on a bench, an elderly couple walking hand in hand. Big villains, giant robots, citywide threats, they get the headlines. But this is the core of it. Making sure people can have a perfectly boring, perfectly wonderful Saturday. That's the real power. He punctuated the last word with a signature flex, his smile so bright it could have powered a small city. Deku couldn't help but grin back, his own anxieties melting away under the force of Mirio's infectious positivity. "You're right, senpai," Deku agreed, his eyes scanning the crowds with a practiced, analytical gaze. He noted exit routes, structural supports of the buildings, the placement of fire hydrants, habits ingrained in him by years of study and Sir Nitai's rigorous training. "Sir always said that maintaining peace is just as important as restoring it." "Exactly. Sir was the best." Mirio's smile softened for a fraction of a second with a flicker of remembered grief, before returning with renewed vigor. "He knew that a hero's presence is like a security blanket for the city. Just by being here, we're telling everyone, hey, don't worry. Go on and enjoy your day. We've got this." Deku nodded, a comfortable silence falling between them as they continued their route through the bustling Kiyoshi Ward shopping mall's outdoor promenade. It was moments like these that solidified his purpose. The rush of One for All was an incredible, intoxicating thing, a galaxy of power thrumming beneath his skin. But the feeling of contributing to this tangible, everyday peace was a different kind of power, quieter, deeper, and infinitely more profound. He felt a surge of gratitude for his quirk, for All Might, for Yue, for this very moment. The first sign of trouble was not a bang, but a whimper, a discordant note in the symphony of the happy street. It was a choked, desperate sob, followed by a sharp cry of, "Hey! Get back here!" Deku's head snapped towards the sound, his entire posture shifting in an instant from relaxed patrol to high alert. Green lightning, the telltale sign of full cowling, crackled faintly around him, a subconscious reflex. Mirio was already moving, his body tensing as he scanned for the source of the disturbance. It came from a narrow alleyway between a boutique electronics store and a quaint little mochi shop. A small crowd was beginning to form a hesitant semicircle around the entrance, their faces a mixture of curiosity and fear. A woman was on her knees, her purse lying open and empty on the ground beside her. He took my wallet," she sobbed, pointing a trembling finger down the alley. "My little Kenji was right there." Deku's eyes followed her gesture. Deeper in the alley, a small boy, no older than 5, stood frozen, a half-eaten dango stick clutched in his tiny fist. Between the boy and the exit stood a man. He was, for lack of a better word, pathetic. He was a scarecrow of a man, thin and hunched in an ill-fitting, mustard-yellow suit that had seen better decades. His greasy hair was plastered to his scalp, and his eyes, wide and bloodshot, darted around with the frantic energy of a cornered rat. He clutched the stolen wallet in one hand like a holy relic. "Stay back!" the man shrieked, his voice cracking with panic. "I am a dangerous villain! I have a powerful quirk!" Mirio took a step forward, his expression shifting from sunny to serious. He held up his hands in a placating gesture. "All right, friend. Let's all just calm down. No one needs to get hurt. You can give the nice lady her wallet back, and we can talk this out. No! No talking! The man whimpered, taking a shuffling step backward, bumping into a stack of discarded cardboard boxes. He seemed more afraid of them than they were of him. This wasn't a mastermind or a monster. This was a man at the end of his rope. Deku began to flank him, moving with a silent, fluid grace. His mind was already working, calculating. Villain is non-combative. Primary motivation appears to be desperation, not malice. One hostage, juvenile, currently unharmed but frightened. Mirio-senpai is positioned for non-lethal takedown via permeation. My role is distraction and civilian protection. Just let the boy go, Deku said, his voice steady and calm, trying to project the same reassuring confidence he'd heard from All Might 1,000 times. We can help you. Whatever trouble you're in, this isn't the way to solve it. The man's wild eyes landed on Deku, and for a moment, a flicker of something other than fear crossed his face, a deep, bottomless loneliness. It was a look Deku had seen before, in the eyes of people who felt unseen and unheard by the world. Help me? He scoffed, a bitter, rattling sound. No one ever wants to help. They just look through you. They ignore you. Well, you can't ignore me now. You'll see. You'll all be so much more agreeable. His declaration was punctuated by a strange, low hum that seemed to emanate from his very core. The air around him began to shimmer, like heat haze rising off summer asphalt. A faint, sickly sweet scent, like artificial cherry blossoms and overripe peaches, filled the narrow alley. It's his quirk! Mirio shouted, his body already beginning to sink into the ground for a surprise attack from below. Midoriya, get the kid! Deku didn't need to be told twice. He pushed off the balls of his feet, green energy flaring around his legs. But the villain was faster than he looked. Panicked by Mirio's disappearing act, he threw his hands forward, not at Deku, but at the entire alley. Just like me! He screamed, a raw, pathetic plea more than a battle cry. From his palms erupted not a beam or a projectile, but an expanding wave of shimmering, translucent pink energy. It wasn't an attack, it was an atmosphere, a tide of pure emotion that washed through the alley. Deku saw the little boy Kenji flinch, his eyes wide with terror as the waves surged towards him. There was no time for a calculated plan. There was no time to analyze. There was only instinct. Deku moved. He covered the distance in a fraction of a second, his body a green blur. He positioned himself directly in front of the child, arms spread wide, turning his back to the oncoming wave. He braced for impact, for pain, for a concussive force. But it wasn't like that at all. The pink energy washed over him, and it didn't hurt. It was like being submerged in warm, carbonated water. 1,000 tiny, effervescent bubbles seemed to pop against his skin and seep into his very being. The sickly sweet smell was suddenly overwhelming, clinging to the inside of his lungs. A profound wave of dizziness crashed over him, making the world tilt on its axis. His thoughts felt thick and slow, as if wading through honey. He could feel the quirk trying to do something to his mind, a gentle, insistent pressure, like a soft thumb pressing against his psyche. He felt a phantom echo of other people's feelings, admiration from the onlookers, Mirio's focused concern, the boy's terror, all being amplified and twisted into something syrupy and strange. Then, just as quickly as it came, it was over. The energy dissipated, leaving only the lingering sweet scent and a faint, staticky feeling in the air. Behind him, Deku heard a small gasp. He turned, his head still swimming, to see the little boy staring up at him, his dango stick forgotten on the ground. From the pavement beneath the villain, Mirio erupted, a force of nature in a white uniform. A single, clean chop to the back of the villain's neck and the man crumpled like a cheap suit, the stolen wallet skittering across the concrete. He was unconscious before he hit the ground. The alley was suddenly silent, save for the approaching sirens. Mirio, ever the professional, was already securing the villain with a set of quirk-suppressing cuffs he produced from a belt pouch. "You okay, Midoriya?" Mirio asked, his brow furrowed with genuine concern as he looked his Kohai over. "That was a weird one. What did it feel like?" Deku shook his head, trying to clear the fuzzy sensation. I'm I'm fine, senpai. Just a little dizzy. It didn't hurt. It just felt strange. Really strange. He knelt down to the little boy's level, forcing a reassuring smile despite the lingering vertigo. Hey there. Are you alright? That was scary, huh? The boy, Kenji, just stared at him. His wide brown eyes were fixed on Deku's face with an UNN. Izuku Midoriya slept the dreamless, heavy sleep of the physically and emotionally exhausted. Patrols with Mirio were always demanding, a constant exercise in hypervigilance and boundless energy, and the strange, disorienting encounter with the desperate villain had left a peculiar residue in his mind, like the phantom limb of a feeling he couldn't quite place. He woke slowly, drifting up through layers of consciousness to the gentle insistence of his all-might-themed alarm clock, which chirped "I am here," in a tinny, synthesized voice. He slapped the off button, groaning as he rolled over. For a blissful, unburdened 30 seconds, everything was normal. The morning sun slanted through his window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The familiar scent of the dorms, a mix of laundry detergent, old books, and whatever culinary experiment Sato was attempting in the kitchens, was a comforting constant. He stretched, his muscles protesting with a satisfying ache. It was Sunday. A day for study, light training, and maybe catching up on laundry. A normal day. The illusion of normalcy shattered the moment he opened his bedroom door. He had intended to just slip out and head for the showers, but his path was blocked by a veritable mountain of stuff. It was piled neatly, a bizarre, multi-tiered offering that reached halfway up his doorframe. Deku blinked, his sleep-addled brain struggling to process the scene. Had he ordered something online and forgotten about it? A lot of somethings? At the very top of the pile, perched precariously, was an elegant, leather-bound notebook. It was a deep forest green, the exact shade of his hero costume, with his name, Izuku Midoriya, embossed in tasteful gold leaf on the cover. A small, cream-colored card was tucked under a leather strap. With a sense of mounting confusion, he picked it up. The handwriting was impeccable, a graceful, flowing script he immediately recognized as Momo Yaoyorozu's. Midoriya-san. It began. I hope this is not too forward, but I was contemplating the sheer volume of data you must process during your hero analysis, and realized your current methods, while admirable, are tragically inefficient. I took the liberty of creating this for you. It features biometric fingerprint and retinal skin security, self-archiving cloud storage, and pages composed of a programmable e-ink polymer that will never run out. The accompanying stylus can analyze 27 different types of ink for forensic study. I believe it will be an invaluable asset in your brilliant analytical pursuits. Please accept it as a small token of my profound respect for your intellect and potential. Sincerely, Momo Yaoyorozu. Deku stared at the note, then at the notebook, which probably cost more than everything he owned combined. A small token? This was military-grade intelligence hardware disguised as stationery. His heart hammered in his chest. It was an incredibly generous gift, but it was also intensely overwhelming. Yaoyorozu was kind, yes, but this level of attention felt disproportionate, almost alarmingly so. Beneath the notebook was a massive, intimidatingly professional-looking bento box, wrapped in a vibrant orange cloth. The smell wafting from it was divine, a rich, savory aroma of soy, ginger, and perfectly cooked pork. A note attached to this one was written in a much blockier, more earnest hand. Midoriya! Sato here! Heard you had a busy patrol yesterday and figured you'd need to refuel. Packed this with extra protein and carbs to maximize muscle recovery and energy output for today's training. A hero fights with his stomach. Eat up. Your strength inspires us all. He carefully lifted the lid. Inside, the food was arranged with the precision of a work of art. A bed of fluffy white rice was topped with a generous portion of glistening katsudon. Nestled beside it were perfectly rolled tamagoyaki, steamed broccoli florets, and to his astonishment, tiny carrots carved into the unmistakable V-shape of All Might's heroic hairdo. It was the most amazing bento he had ever seen. And again, a confusingly intense gesture. Sato was a great guy, but they weren't that close. The final items in the pile were the most baffling. It was a set of brand new, chrome-plated wrist and ankle weights. They were massive, each one looking like it weighed more than a car battery. Deku nudged one with his toe and it barely budged. Taped to the largest weight was a piece of paper ripped from a notebook, the writing jagged and full of energy. Yo, Midoriya! Saw these and thought of you. You're always pushing yourself past your limits, which is super manly. Thought you could use some gear that can keep up with your fighting spirit. Let's get a training session in later, and show everyone what real guts look like. From your best bud, Eijiro Kirishima. Deku stared at the weights, then at his own arms. He used weights for training, of course, but these were on another level entirely. He doubted he could even walk properly with them on, let alone train. It was a gesture born of Kirishima's signature brand of earnest, hardcore encouragement, but magnified to 1,000. He stood there in his doorway, a high-tech spy notebook in one hand and a gourmet lunch in the other, staring at a pile of impossibly heavy exercise equipment. His mind reeled. Yaoyorozu, Sato, Kirishima, they were his friends. They were good people. But this felt like something else. This was a coordinated, overwhelming campaign of unsolicited affection. The uneasy feeling from the previous day returned with a vengeance, coiling in his stomach like a cold snake. This wasn't just a weird day. Something was fundamentally wrong. With a deep sense of trepidation, he managed to maneuver the gifts into his room and get ready. He decided to leave the items for now, planning to thank each of them personally and perhaps gently question their motives. As he walked into the common room of Heights Alliance, the atmosphere felt charged. The usual Sunday morning buzz was there, but it was all angled, like a field of sunflowers, towards him. Good morning, Midoriya-kun, Tenya Ida announced, striding towards him with such purpose that his hand-chopping motions seemed to carve the air. I trust you slept well. Adequate rest is paramount for a hero's cognitive and physical functions. I have already prepared a detailed schedule for optimal Sunday productivity, which I have, of course, centered around your own training regimen. He produced a laminated flowchart from thin air. Oh, thank you, Ida-kun, but you really don't have to. Deku stammered, his eyes wide. Nonsense! Your dedication is the benchmark for our entire class. It is my duty as class representative to facilitate your continued excellence in every conceivable way, Ida declared, his face a mask of fierce, unwavering sincerity. Before Deku could formulate a response, Achiko Uraraka seemed to materialize at his side, her cheeks already a shade of crimson that clashed with her pink pajamas. Good morning, Deku-kun, she squeaked, her voice an octave higher than usual. She was clutching a laundry basket to her chest like a shield. I noticed you had a patrol yesterday, and you're probably tired, so I was just wondering, maybe, if you wanted me to do your laundry for you? Deku's brain short-circuited. Uraraka-san! No! I couldn't possibly ask you to do that. It's no trouble, she insisted, her eyes wide and pleading. Really? I like doing laundry. It's relaxing. And your hero costume probably needs special care, and I read a book about fabric maintenance, so I'm basically an expert now. Nearby, Tsuyu Ajui watched them, her finger pressed to her chin in her usual thoughtful pose. But her gaze was unusually intense, her large eyes fixed on Deku. Midoriya-chan, she said, her voice a low, steady croak. You seem troubled. Perhaps a long, quiet talk by the pond would help you organize your thoughts. I find the rhythmic croaking of my distant cousins to be very soothing. Karo, the offers, the intense stares, the sheer focused energy, it was suffocating. He felt like a specimen under a microscope. Even Kaminari and Mineta, who were usually chasing after the girls or scheming some new harebrained antic, simply watched him from the sofa with an expression of unnerving reverence. Wow! Kaminari murmured to Mineta, his voice full of genuine awe. Look at him. He's got this heroic aura, you know. Like you just know he's going to do something amazing today. Mineta nodded sagely, a single, solemn tear rolling down his cheek. He's the peak of heroic masculinity. A true inspiration. He makes me want to be a better man. Deku heard this, and his blood ran cold. Mineta wanting to be a better man was perhaps the most terrifying, world-altering thing he had ever witnessed. He mumbled a series of flustered excuses and practically fled the common room, the weight of a dozen pairs of devoted eyes boring into his back. The sanctuary of the classroom offered no respite. If anything, it was worse. Here, the bizarre devotion was concentrated, distilled into its most potent form. As he walked towards his usual desk, a blur of pink and a flicker of nothing shot past him. "I call the seat next to Midoriya," Mina Ashido chirped, sliding into the chair to Deku's right with a practiced, fluid motion. "No fair, Mina-chan. I was going to sit there," came the disembodied voice of Toru Hagakure. A moment later, Mina yelped as the chair was pulled out from under her, sending her tumbling to the floor in a heap. "Hey! Uncool, Toru!" Mina pouted, scrambling back up. She stomped her foot, leaving a small, sizzling puddle of acid on the floor. "I need to ask him about his new super moves. It's important hero business. Well, I need to ask him about his patrol route analysis," Toru retorted, her floating uniform gesturing wildly. "That's way more important." The two began to bicker, their argument escalating with alarming speed. It wasn't friendly teasing. There was a sharp, competitive edge to their voices that made Deku flinch. He just wanted to sink into his chair and disappear. Suddenly, a wave of cold air washed over the room, and a pristine, perfectly smooth wall of ice erupted from the floor. It formed a neat, three-sided cubicle around Deku's desk, effectively sealing him off from the rest of the class, including the still squabbling girls. Everyone fell silent. Shoto Todoroki stood beside the newly formed structure, his right hand still smoking with frost. He looked at the ice wall with a serene, almost clinical satisfaction. "There," he stated, his voice calm and even, yet carrying an unnerving finality. "Midoriya requires a stable and regulated environment to achieve his maximum potential. I am providing him with personal climate control, free from unnecessary distractions." He then took up a sentinel-like position by the entrance to the ice fort, his heterochromatic eyes daring anyone to approach. The class stared, dumbfounded. Deku sat frozen in his chair, a prisoner in his own icy kingdom. He could feel the chill seeping into his uniform. This was insane. This was beyond insane. Todoroki, his quiet, stoic friend, had just built him a fortress of solitude in the middle of their classroom. The tension was so thick it felt solid. It was finally broken by the scraping sound of the classroom door sliding open. Shota Aizawa slouched in, looking even more tired than usual, his capture weapon draped around his neck like a lethargic snake. He surveyed the scene, the ice wall, Todoroki standing guard, Mina and Toru glaring at each other, and Deku's terrified face peeking over his frozen barricade, and let out a sigh so profound it seemed to carry the weight of all the world's suffering. "Todoroki," he said, his voice a gravelly monotone. "Melt it." "Now." Todoroki gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head. "With respect, Sensei, Midoriya's optimal performance is a tactical priority for the class." Aizawa's eyes flared with a brief, terrifying crimson light, his quirk erasing Todoroki's. "Melt it." With a reluctant sigh, Todoroki placed a hand on the wall, and steam filled the air as the ice dissolved into puddles on the floor. The crisis was averted, but the strangeness lingered, a heavy blanket over the entire room. Aizawa began the lesson, his voice a droning lecture on the legal ramifications of property damage during urban hero engagements. But no one was truly paying attention. The focus of the room remained stubbornly fixed on Deku, a silent, overwhelming pressure that made the hairs on his arms stand up. The true explosion, however, was yet to come. "For this afternoon's practical exercise," Aizawa announced, his voice cutting through the tense atmosphere, "you will be participating in one-on-one combat assessments. Standard rules. The goal is to incapacitate or force a surrender from your opponent. I have the pairings here." A murmur of excitement and nervousness went through the class. Sparring was a chance to test their limits, to prove how much they had grown. For Deku, it was a chance to do something normal, something he understood. "First up," Aizawa drawled. "Ojiro versus Midoriya." Mashireo Ojiro, his powerful tail swishing slightly behind him, gave Deku a respectful nod from across the room. "Looking forward to it, Midoriya. Let's have a good match." "You too, Ojiro-kun," Deku replied, a surge of relief washing through him. Ojiro was a skilled and honorable fighter. This would be a clean, straightforward spar. This would be normal. He never got the chance. Boom. The sound was deafening, a contained, concussive blast that rattled the windows in their frames. Katsuki Bakugo was on his feet, his hands sparking, small detonations popping from his palms like furious firecrackers. His chair had been knocked backward, and his entire body was rigid with a terrifying, incandescent rage. His crimson eyes were locked on Ojiro, burning with a hatred so pure and concentrated it seemed to warp the very air around him. "The hell did you just say, tail freak?" Bakugo snarled, his voice a low, guttural growl that promised violence. Ojiro blinked, taken aback. I just said I was looking forward to our match." "Your match?" Bakugo took a step forward, a plume of smoke curling from his clenched fist. "Your match? With Deku?" The way he said Deku's name was different. It wasn't the usual contemptuous sneer. It was sharp, jagged, and possessive, like a dog guarding its most prized bone. "You think you have the right?" Bakugo screamed, his voice escalating into a full-blown roar. He jabbed a finger at Ojiro, his whole body trembling. "You think your pathetic little tail whipping is worthy of standing in the same ring as him? Don't make me laugh!" The entire class was frozen in horrified silence. Bakugo's rages were legendary, but this was something else entirely. This wasn't about his own pride, his own desire to be number one. This was about Deku. "The only one who gets to fight him is me," Bakugo bellowed, taking another thunderous step forward. "The only one who gets to crush him, who gets to push him, who gets to be the wall he has to climb over, is me. He is my rival. Mine. You extras aren't even qualified to be footnotes in his story. I'm the co-star." He slammed his fist on his own desk, splintering the wood. "No one else is allowed to fight him. Only my power is worthy of sharpening his. Do you understand?" His wild, possessive gaze swept the room, daring anyone to contradict him. No one did. Ojiro had taken a step back, his hands raised defensively, his face pale with shock. Everyone was staring, their expressions a mixture of fear and utter bewilderment. And in that moment, for Izuku Midoriya, everything finally, horribly, clicked into place. The villain's words. "You'll all be so much more agreeable." The shimmering pink light. The dizziness. The strange, subtle shifts in everyone's behavior that had started yesterday. Uraraka's blush, Ida's praise, Kirishima's over-the-top gift. It hadn't been his imagination. It had been growing, festering, amplifying. It was the quirk. The villain's quirk had hit him, and it was doing this. It was twisting his friends' admiration, their respect, their camaraderie, their rivalry, and turning it into this dangerous, suffocating, obsessive devotion. Yairo's gift wasn't just respect for his intellect. It was a possessive desire to be the sole provider for it. Sato's bento wasn't just about providing energy. It was about being the source of his strength. Todoroki's ice wall wasn't just about eliminating distractions. It was about isolating him, controlling his environment, owning his space. And Bakugo's lifelong, complex, burning rivalry had been warped into an absolute, tyrannical ownership over his very existence as a hero. The realization crashed over him not as a wave of relief, but as a tidal wave of pure, unadulterated terror. He wasn't just having a weird couple of days. He was the epicenter of a psychological plague. "Bakugo, that's enough!" Aizawa's voice cut through the haze of Deku's panic. His capture weapon shot out, wrapping around Bakugo's torso and arms, and his eyes glowed red, neutralizing the explosive quirk. "You're on cleaning duty for a week. Sit down and be silent, or you'll be suspended." Bakugo struggled against the bonds for a moment, his chest heaving, before slumping back into his damaged chair with a final, hateful snarl. The exercise was, of course, cancelled. The atmosphere in the classroom was ruined, thick with a toxic blend of fear and awkwardness. Deku felt nauseous. He had to tell someone. He had to tell Aizawa. His teacher was logical, rational. He could see past emotions. He would understand. He was the one person who could surely see this for what it was. He waited until the bell rang, signaling the end of the day. The other students filed out in a strange, subdued silence, many of them casting worried, proprietary glances back at him. He waited until the classroom was empty, save for his teacher, who was erasing the blackboard with weary, methodical strokes. "Aizawa-sensei?" Deku said, his voice barely a whisper. Aizawa turned, his expression tired but patient. "What is it, Midoriya? You're not still shaken up about Bakugo's outburst, are you? It's illogical, but you should be used to his temperament by now." "No, sensei, it's not just that." Deku took a deep breath, forcing the words out. "I think yesterday on patrol, I was hit by a quirk. The villain, the one Mirio-senpai and I apprehended, he said it would make people more agreeable. He explained everything, his voice trembling as he recounted the events. The pink light, the gifts, the fight over the seat, Todoroki's ice wall, and finally, Bakugo's terrifying declaration. I think his quirk, it's affecting everyone. It's making them obsessed with me. It's not real. None of it is." He watched his teacher's face, desperately searching for a flicker of understanding, a sign that he was getting through, that he wasn't alone in this madness. He expected skepticism, a demand for evidence, the usual tired, logical dismantling of a panic theory. He did not get it. Aizawa's perpetually exhausted expression softened. The hard lines around his eyes seemed to smooth out, and a strange, unfamiliar emotion flickered in their dark depths. It looked almost like pride, a deep, gentle, paternal pride. He walked over and placed a heavy, reassuring hand on Deku's shoulder. The contact sent an involuntary shiver down Deku's spine. "Midoriya," Aizawa said, and his voice was softer than Deku had ever heard it, stripped of its usual abrasive edge. "Listen to me. A quirk that makes people obsessed with you, that's a highly irrational conclusion. The logical explanation is far simpler." He looked Deku directly in the eyes, his gaze steady and alarmingly warm. "You've been working harder than anyone. You've faced down villains that would make seasoned pros hesitate. You inspire people, problem child. You have a gravitational pull to you. It's only natural that your classmates are finally starting to recognize your true potential. They respect you. They admire you. Bakugo sees you as the ultimate benchmark for his own strength. You've earned this, Midoriya." Aizawa gave his shoulder a gentle squeeze. "Don't question it. Their faith in you is a logical response to the hero you are becoming." The blood drained from Deku's face, his last hope. His bastion of logic and reason. His teacher, the man who could erase quirks with a glance, was not immune. He was infected too. His rational mind had taken the quirk's influence and twisted it, reframing the obsession as a logical consequence of Deku's heroism. He was truly, utterly alone. Aizawa turned and headed for the door. "Get some rest, Midoriya. You have a lot of people counting on you." The door to the faculty lounge clicked shut, leaving Izuku Midoriya standing in the center of the empty, silent classroom. The setting sun cast long, distorted shadows across the floor, making the room feel like a cage. He was no longer just a student. He was an object of affection, a prize to be won, a symbol to be protected, and the one person he thought could save him had just locked the door from the outside. Izuku Midoriya didn't run from the classroom. He walked. It was a slow, deliberate, and utterly terrifying journey. Each step felt like wading through a sea of invisible, grasping hands. The revelation that Aizawa, his pillar of unshakable logic, had also fallen victim to the quirk had shattered his last illusion of safety. He was no longer just a student in a school. He was a relic in a museum of fanatics, the quiet center of a storm he couldn't control. The hallways of UA, usually a boisterous river of youthful energy, felt different now. Predatory. Every glance from a passing student felt heavy with unspoken meaning. A second year from the business course, a girl he'd never spoken to, stopped him mid-stride, her eyes gleaming with an unnerving entrepreneurial fervor. "Midoriya-san! Just the man I wanted to see," she'd said, already pulling a tablet from her bag. "I've run the numbers, and your marketability index is skyrocketing. I've drafted a proposal for a full line of Decumite merchandise. Motivational posters, plushies that say Plus Ultra, when you squeeze them, even an energy drink. We'll call it full calling fuel. With your image and my business acumen, We'll build an empire dedicated to spreading your heroic message. He had stammered something about being too busy and practically fled her calls of, "Think of the branding synergy!" echoing behind him. A few feet later, a hulking third year with a rock-based quirk had offered to be his personal, unpaid bodyguard, citing a sudden, overwhelming urge to protect the future of heroism. Deku politely declined, his heart thumping a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The aura, the insidious pink glow he could almost feel clinging to him, was clearly not limited by the walls of Classroom 1A. It was a broadcast, a signal that pulsed outwards, and anyone with a pre-existing kernel of respect or admiration for him was a potential receiver. Given his recent high-profile exploits, the sports festival, the fight against Stain, the Kamino incident, the Shai Hasaikai raid, that was a terrifyingly large number of people. He was a walking, talking nexus of emotional contagion. His desperate hope was to make it back to the Heights Alliance dorm, lock himself in his room, and just think. He needed a plan. He needed to find the original villain, to understand the quirk's mechanics, to find a cure. But UA's sprawling campus was a minefield, and he had just walked into the most volatile section. As he rounded the corner into the main courtyard, a familiar voice, sharp and authoritative, cut through the air. "Hold it right there, Midoriya!" Itsuka Kendo, the class representative of 1B, stood before him, her hands planted firmly on her hips. She was flanked by several of her classmates, Jiroda Shishida, Kinoko Komori, and a grim-faced Tetsu, who looked at Deku with the same intense, burning spirit he usually reserved for Kirishima. "Kei Kendo-san!" Deku flinched, bracing himself for, he wasn't sure what. A challenge? An accusation? Kendo's expression, however, wasn't hostile. It was one of profound, serious concern, the look of a manager assessing a valuable but chaotic asset. "I've been observing the social dynamics surrounding you for the past few hours," she said, her voice crisp and efficient. "It's become clear that your rising prominence has created a logistical nightmare. Your admirers are disorganized, their efforts to gain your attention are inefficient, and frankly, counterproductive to your heroic development." Deku stared at her, utterly speechless. She was talking about his friends, their friends, like they were an unruly fan club. "Therefore," she continued, completely missing his bewildered expression, "I have taken the liberty of stepping in. As a fellow class representative, I feel it is my duty to manage this situation. I will be drafting a schedule for all student interactions with you. Time slots will be allocated based on a tiered system of relevance to your mission. Class 1A will naturally have priority, but all offerings of support, gifts, and training proposals must now go through me for approval. This will ensure your time and energy are optimized for greatness." She smiled, a confident, self-assured expression that was terrifying in its sincerity. "Don't worry, Midoriya. I'll handle the rabble. You just focus on being the symbol we all know you can be." Tetsu pounded his steel fists together. "Yeah! Kendo's got the brains. She'll make sure only the most passionate and steel-willed people get near you. People like me." This was a new circle of hell. She wasn't trying to get close to him for her own sake. She was trying to control access to him, appointing herself as the gatekeeper of his life. Before he could even begin to form a protest, another, far more grating voice sliced through the air, dripping with theatrical condescension. "Oh, how utterly precious! The big sister of the B-list heroes thinks she can manage the main character? How laughably pedestrian!" Nito Monoma sauntered into view, a wicked, all-too-wide grin plastered on his face. His stride was a parody of a stage actor's, each step laden with dramatic flair. He circled Deku slowly, his eyes gleaming with a manic, analytical light, like a biologist who had just discovered a fascinating new species of beetle. "Midoriya of Class 1A, he crooned, his voice a strange mix of his usual mockery and a new, breathless awe. "I must confess I have been observing you from afar, and I have come to a stunning conclusion. You are not merely the protagonist of your little class's story, you are the sun around which this entire school has begun to orbit. A gravitational singularity of heroic potential. It's magnificent, and of course, absolutely infuriating." He let out a short, sharp laugh that sounded more like a bark. "Class 1A doesn't deserve you, of course. They are but pale moons, reflecting your glory without understanding its source. They fawn and grovel, but do they study you? Do they seek to comprehend the magnificent, paradoxical engine of self-destruction and reckless power that drives you? Monoma's hand shot out, his fingers brushing against Deku's arm. Deku flinched back as if burned. In an instant, Monoma's skin took on a faint, shimmering quality. There! He exclaimed, holding up his hand as faint green sparks, a perfect imitation of One for All's lightning, danced between his fingers. He didn't activate the power. He couldn't, as the quirk itself was a stockpile of energy, not something Monoma could copy, but the visual effect was perfect. To touch you is to touch greatness itself. I must copy every quirk in your class, every fighting style, every nuance, to create a perfect context in which to understand you. I will become the ultimate Midoriya scholar. My thesis on your very existence will be legendary. His taunts, once designed to belittle Class 1A, had been warped by the quirk. He was still mocking them, but now the reason was their perceived inadequacy in their worship of Deku. His obsession wasn't romantic or protective, it was academic, analytical, and utterly invasive. He saw Deku not as a person, but as the ultimate subject of study, the grand puzzle he was destined to solve and, in doing so, prove his own superiority. Get away from him, Monoma! Kendo snapped, her hand enlarging as she prepared to chop him. Your presence is an unapproved, chaotic variable. Chaos is the crucible of genius, my dear Kendo! Monoma cackled, dancing away from her strike. You seek to cage the sun, while I seek to map its solar flares. Deku saw his chance. While the two class reps were distracted, he bolted. He ran without looking back, the sound of their arguing fading behind him. He needed to get away, to find somewhere, anywhere, that was quiet. His frantic eyes scanned the campus map in his head. The support course workshop. It was always loud, chaotic, and full of explosions. It was the perfect place to get lost in the noise, a place where no one would be paying him any special attention. It was, he would soon realize, the single worst decision he could have possibly made. The air in the support course workshop, known affectionately as Development Studio 104, was a thick, heady cocktail of ozone, burnt sugar, hot metal, and pure, unadulterated ambition. It was a cavern of organized chaos, where the symphony of grinding gears, high-pitched whines of power tools, and the occasional percussive boom was music to the ears of its inhabitants. Deku slipped inside, hoping to find a quiet corner behind a pile of scrap metal. For a moment it worked. He found a spot behind a decommissioned jet engine, sinking to the floor and pulling his knees to his chest. He closed his eyes, trying to regulate his breathing, the industrial noise a welcome blanket over the cacophony in his own mind. He was so focused on calming his racing heart that he didn't hear the distinctive, high-speed whirring until it was almost on top of him. Target acquired! A familiar, cheerful voice shrieked over the din. Deku's eyes snapped open just as Mahatsum, her pink dreadlocks flying behind her like celebratory streamers and her goggles pushed up on her forehead, descended from the ceiling on a grappling hook winch system of her own design. She landed in a perfect crouch a few feet in front of him, her golden eyes, magnified by her zoom lenses, fixed on him with an intensity that dwarfed even Monoma's. Izuku Midoriya! She declared, her voice echoing slightly in the vast workshop. My prime investor! My muse! My future hero husband! I knew my baby sensors would detect your magnificent presence! Deku scrambled backwards, his back hitting the cold metal of the jet engine. Hatsum-san! What are you doing? What am I doing? She sprung to her feet, a manic grin stretching from ear to ear. I'm fulfilling my destiny. Ever since I first laid my eyes on your reckless, quirk-destroying fighting style at the sports festival, I knew you were the ultimate canvas for my art, the perfect test pilot for all my beautiful babies. Before he could respond, she grabbed his arm with surprising strength, her hands smudged with grease and engine oil. Come! Come! I've been so busy since I felt your heroic essence calling to me this morning. She dragged him through the chaotic workshop, expertly weaving around welding sparks and miniature drones zipping through the air. She brought him to her personal workstation, which was, if possible, even more chaotic than the rest of the room. Blueprints were pinned haphazardly over every available surface, many of them featuring detailed, and frankly, uncomfortably flattering, anatomical sketches of Deku himself. And on the main workbench, gleaming under the harsh industrial lights, were her latest creations. "Behold!" she announced, gesturing with a grand flourish. "First, an upgrade to your iron saws. I call them the Meteor Striders. They feature kinetic energy recyclers and secondary plasma thrusters for sustained aerial maneuverability. Perfectly calibrated to support your magnificent quadriceps." She then pointed to a sleek, dark green gauntlet. "This is the Fist of Fidelity. It's not just for support, my love. It has an integrated biometric scanner that constantly monitors your heart rate, lactate levels, and one for all output. It transmits the data directly to a private server only I have access to, so I'll always know exactly what you need, even before you do. It's the ultimate expression of supportive intimacy." Deku felt a profound wave of nausea. A tracking device. She had built him a beautiful, high-tech tracking device and called it intimacy. And this? She purred, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper as she unveiled her masterpiece. It was a full-body suit, a more streamlined and armored version of his current gamma costume. "Is the embrace of ingenuity. It has a subdermal biofoam injection system for instant wound treatment, a chameleonic stealth function, and a neural interface that will allow me to offer you real-time tactical advice directly into your prefrontal cortex. We will be one. One mind, one body, one heroic purpose. Our babies will be unstoppable." Power Loader, who had been observing the scene with a mounting sense of dread, finally intervened. "Hatsum, that is a terrifying number of ethics violations. Get away from him. You can't just neurally link yourself to another student." "Silence, Sensei!" Hatsum shot back without even looking at him, her entire world narrowed down to Deku. "You cannot stand in the way of true progress. True love. Izuku and I are destined to be the ultimate hero and support team power couple. Our combined genius will redefine heroism itself." She lunged forward, trying to slap the Fist of Fidelity onto his wrist. Deku yelped and dodged, stumbling over a pile of spare parts. This was too much. The gifts from his classmates were one thing, but this was a physical, technological invasion. He turned and ran, a fresh wave of adrenaline propelling him. "Wait, my darling Izuku!" Hatsum's voice called after him, filled with genuine, heartbroken confusion. "Don't you want to see the schematics for our future children? I've already designed 3 of them. They'll have my eyes and your heroic spirit." He burst out of the workshop, gasping for air, the image of blueprint babies seared into his brain. He didn't stop running until he was in a deserted corridor connecting the main UA building to the gyms, his lungs burning and his mind screaming. He slumped against the wall, sliding down to the floor, and buried his face in his hands. It was official. He was living in a nightmare. His friends, his rivals, his teachers, his fellow students, everyone was being consumed by this twisted affection. He had never felt so utterly, terrifyingly alone. "You know," a quiet, tired voice said from the end of the hall. "For a guy who's suddenly the most popular person in the country, you look pretty miserable." Deku's head snapped up. Leaning against the far wall, half shrouded in shadow, was Hitoshi Shinso from the General Studies course. His purple hair was as wild as ever, and the dark circles under his eyes seemed more pronounced than usual. He wasn't looking at Deku with the same feverish intensity as everyone else. His expression was wary, analytical, and sane. "Shinso-kun," Deku breathed, his voice hoarse. Shinso pushed himself off the wall and walked slowly closer, keeping a respectful distance. He didn't rush, he didn't offer any gifts or unsolicited advice. He just watched Deku, his gaze sharp and discerning. "I saw what happened back there with Monoma and Kendo," Shinso said, his voice a low monotone. "And I've been hearing things all day. Everyone's acting like you personally hung the moon for them. It's not normal." Deku's heart seized. Was this a trick? Another variation of the quirk's influence? As if reading his mind, Shinso let out a dry, humorless chuckle. "Don't worry. I'm not going to offer to carry your books or design a statue of you. In fact, being around you right now feels weird. It's like listening to really loud, off-key music. There's this feeling in the air. This pull. A warm, fuzzy suggestion that I should think you're the greatest thing since sliced bread and dedicate my life to your success. He tapped his temple. My quirk deals with the mind. I'm sensitive to this kind of thing. And whatever this is, it feels cheap. Like a badly written line of code trying to brute force its way into my head. It's not a genuine emotion. It's a signal. The words hit Deku with the force of a physical blow. A signal. Not a trick of his own mind. Not a mass delusion. Real, tangible proof from someone else. He wasn't crazy. You feel it too? Deku asked, his voice cracking with a desperate, burgeoning hope. You don't believe it? Believe it? Midoriya, it's screaming I'm a mind-altering quirk, Shinso said bluntly. I'm guessing you ran into some trouble yesterday? And for the first time since the ordeal began, Deku told the full story to someone who listened. He told Shinso about the villain, the pink light, the gifts, Bakugo's possessive rage, Aizawa's twisted logic, Kendo's obsessive management, Monoma's analytical fixation, and Hatsume's terrifying babies. He didn't hold anything back, the words spilling out of him in a torrent of pent-up fear and desperation. Shinso listened patiently, his expression unchanging until Deku finished. He was silent for a long moment, processing everything. So, a quirk that amplifies positive feelings into dangerous obsession. He finally summarized, his voice grim. And it's key to you, the one person at this school who has probably forged more positive bonds than anyone else. That's a catastrophe. And Aizawa-sensei is affected? Damn, Deku nodded, a fresh wave of despair washing over him. What do I do? I'm alone in this. I can't talk to anyone. You're not alone, Shinso said, and for the first time, his tired eyes held a spark of fierce determination. You're talking to me. Look, I'm not in the hero course. I can move around, observe things, without anyone paying much attention to me. I can be your eyes and ears. Your ally. He offered a hand to Deku. You've got one sane man on your side. We'll figure this out. Deku stared at his outstretched hand, and then at Shinso's face. There was no fawning adoration there, no obsessive gleam. Just the quiet, steady resolve of a fellow student offering help. With a trembling hand, Deku reached out and shook it. The simple, normal contact was the most reassuring thing he had felt in 2 days. Thank you, Shinso-kun, he whispered, tears of pure, unadulterated relief welling in his eyes. Thank you? A flicker of hope had been ignited in the suffocating darkness. It wasn't a solution, but it was a start. He had an ally. He wasn't alone. Maybe, just maybe, he could get through this. That fragile hope was put to the ultimate test when he finally returned to the Heights Alliance dorm that evening. He managed to slip in while most of the others were preoccupied in the kitchen, the sounds of a heated argument over who was going to cook Deku's dinner echoing from within. He made a beeline for the elevators, his heart pounding. Young Midoriya! There you are! The voice, once the source of all his hope and inspiration, now sent a spear of ice through his veins. He turned slowly. All Might was standing in the entrance to the lounge, not in his muscle form, but as the skeletal, fragile Toshinori Yagi. His sunken blue eyes were wide with a frantic, overbearing concern. He was holding a steaming mug in his trembling hands. I was so worried, Toshinori said, his voice thin and reedy. He scurried over, his movements jerky and anxious. I heard about the commotion in the classroom, and then you were gone for so long. Are you all right? Are you hurt? Are you emotionally compromised? I'm fine, All Might, really, Deku said, trying to keep his voice steady. I just needed some air. Air? Is the air in the dorm not pure enough? I can have the filtration systems checked, Toshinori insisted, thrusting the mug towards him. Here, I made you some chamomile tea. With a touch of honey. It's good for the nerves. Your nerves are so important, you carry such a heavy burden, such a fragile, precious vessel for our hope. His rambling was unnerving. This wasn't the wise, if sometimes goofy, mentor he knew. This was a man consumed by a smothering, obsessive anxiety. His fatherly pride, the most powerful and genuine positive emotion directed at Deku, had been twisted by the quirk into something pathetic and suffocating. Deku took the mug, his fingers brushing against Toshinori's. Thank you? I appreciate it. Of course, my boy, of course, Toshinori said, but he didn't let go. Instead, his free hand darted out and began fussing with the collar of Deku's uniform. Your collar is crooked. You must always look your best. The symbol must be immaculate. And is that a loose thread? Unacceptable. He began picking at a tiny, invisible thread on Deku's sleeve, his brow furrowed in intense concentration. You must tell me if you need anything. Anything at all. Are your socks warm enough? Did you eat a balanced lunch? I can prepare all your meals from now on, to ensure optimal nutritional intake. You shouldn't have to worry about such mundane things. Your mind should be free to focus on heroism. All might, please, Deku said, gently trying to pull his arm away. I'm okay. I can take care of myself. Toshinori's head snapped up, and the look in his eyes was one of pure, wounded panic. He gripped Deku's arm tighter, his bony fingers surprisingly strong. No! He gasped, a trickle of blood dribbling from the corner of his mouth. No, you can't! The world is too dangerous, your burden too great. I failed Sir Nightai. I failed to protect him. I won't fail you, my boy. I will be your shield. I will protect you from everything. From villains, from stress, from an unbalanced diet, from uncomfortable socks. I swear it. Deku stared into the face of his idol, his hero, the symbol of peace. And he saw not a hero, but a jailer. A jailer forged from love and twisted by a madman's quirk. The hope he had felt was Shinso curdled in his stomach, replaced by a cold, profound horror. This contagion wasn't just affecting his friends. It had poisoned his most sacred bond, turning the very source of his strength into a cage of smothering affection. He was trapped, utterly and completely trapped. Shoto Aizawa operated on a carefully cultivated baseline of exhaustion and cynicism. It was his shield, his diagnostic tool. In a world of flamboyant heroes and emotionally volatile teenagers, his own perpetual weariness was a grounding force, a constant against which he measured the chaos of his life. But for the past 24 hours, a foreign element had been introduced into his system. It was a warm, illogical hum in the back of his mind, a syrupy suggestion that whispered praises for his most problematic student. He was in his office, a Spartan room that was more of a glorified closet, reviewing security footage from Midoriya and Togata's patrol the previous day. Normally, this was a grimly satisfying task, a hunt for tactical errors, moments of hesitation, and breaches in protocol that he could use to drill his students into a state of near perfection. He watched the screen, his tired eyes tracking the green blur of Midoriya's costume. Impeccable civilian shielding, the thoughts surfaced, unbidden. Textbook form. Notice the low center of gravity, the precise distribution of weight to minimize collateral damage. Absolutely flawless. Aizawa blinked. He didn't think in terms of flawless. He thought in terms of acceptable and needs improvement. He rewound the footage, watching the moment the villain unleashed that bizarre pink energy wave. He saw Midoriya move, placing himself between the quirk and the child. Such selfless heroism, the voice in his head cooed, sickeningly sweet. The instinct is instantaneous. He doesn't calculate his own safety. He is the very embodiment of the heroic spirit. Aizawa's fingers tightened around his coffee mug. His own mind was betraying him, feeding him the kind of saccharine, uncritical praise he usually associated with President Mix's radio show. He felt a faint, irrational urge to pull up Midoriya's file, not to review his disciplinary record, but to add a glowing commendation, to ensure Nizu was aware of the sheer, unparalleled potential humming within the boy. He shook his head, a physical tic to dislodge the intrusive thoughts. It was just fatigue. It had to be. But then his terminal pinged, a new incident report flagged for his attention. He opened it. It was a formal complaint from the support course, detailing Mei Hatsume's unauthorized and ethically dubious attempt to attach a biometric tracking gauntlet to Izuku Midoriya. It included her manic declaration of them being a hero and support team power couple. Another ping. A report from Hound Dog, who had been called to mediate a territorial dispute in the main courtyard between Itsuka Kendo and Nito Monoma. The subject of the dispute, the proper management and academic study of Izuku Midoriya. A third ping. An alert from the automated systems in the 1A classroom. extreme temperature fluctuations and minor property damage, concurrent with an unscheduled sparring declaration from Katsuki Bakugo, aimed not at an opponent, but at anyone else who wished to spar with Izuku Midoriya. Aizawa stared at the screen, the 3 reports glowing like damning evidence. He lined them up, and the pattern was no longer a coincidence. It was a mathematical certainty. Hatsume's obsession, Kendo's and Monoma's bizarre claims of ownership, Bakugo's possessive fury. All of it, every single illogical, emotional outburst, revolved around a single, common denominator, Midoriya. And then, his student's words from yesterday echoed in his memory, suddenly chillingly clear. I was hit by a quirk. He said it would make people more agreeable. I think it's affecting everyone. It's making them obsessed with me. He remembered the look on the boy's face, the desperate, pleading panic. He remembered how he had felt it, that warm, paternal pride, and how he had used his own twisted logic to dismiss the boy's fears. He had told him it was natural, that he'd earned it. He hadn't been a teacher offering rational guidance. He had been another victim, reinforcing the very cage that was closing in around his student. A cold dread, sharp and clarifying, cut through the syrupy fog in his mind. He had failed. He had looked a student in the eye, a student who was asking for help, and his own compromised mind had failed him. He activated his quirk. His hair floated, and his eyes glowed with a familiar crimson light. He wasn't looking at anyone, wasn't erasing another's power. He was focusing his entire being on the sensation of erasure itself, using it as a mental anchor in the storm of irrational emotion. For a precious few seconds, the warm hum in his head vanished, silenced by the absolute, nullifying power of his gaze. The world sharpened. The cloying sweetness was gone, leaving only the cold, hard facts. Midoriya was right. This was a quirk. A subtle, insidious, mind-altering quirk that was spreading through his school like a virus. And he had just let the primary target walk away, telling him he was imagining it. Damn it! He hissed, the word a puff of cold air in the silent room. He stood up, his movements sharp and purposeful. There was no time to waste on self-recrimination. He had a crisis to manage. He sent out a single, Priority 1 message to the entire UA faculty. Mandatory staff meeting. Teacher's lounge. Now, the teacher's lounge was usually a place of quiet professionalism, the air smelling of coffee and paperwork. Today, it was a circus of concentrated obsession. The moment Aizawa stepped inside, the sheer density of the effect hit him like a physical force. The warm hum was back, amplified by 24 other sources, a choir of minds all singing the same irrational hymn of praise for Izuku Midoriya. President Mike was practically bouncing in his chair, a pair of oversized headphones around his neck. He was scribbling furiously on a notepad, a manic grin on his face. Listen to this, Shota, he boomed, not waiting for a response. I'm workshopping some new jingles for my next show, all dedicated to our little listener, Midoriya. Feeling down? In a rut? Think of Deku and strut your stuff, or how about this for a station ID? You're listening to 101.5 Hero FM, the home of rockin' tunes and the official sound of the Decanamite generation. It's gold, right? Aizawa just stared at him, his expression grim. Across the room, Midnight was hunched over a large sketchpad, her tongue sticking out slightly in concentration. Several other female teachers were gathered around her, offering breathless suggestions. Namiri, the lines on this are simply divine. One of them cooed. Thank you, but I'm still not satisfied with the support structure. Midnight murmured, her pen flying across the page. She held up the drawing for them to see. It was a hero costume designed for Deku, a horrifying one. It was sleek, form-fitting to an absurd degree, and featured several strategic cutouts and sheer panels that served no tactical purpose whatsoever. It was less of a hero costume and more of a figure skating outfit designed for an R-rated ice show. My thesis is that his current costume is too bulky, Midnight explained with the conviction of a seasoned academic. It hides the elegant lines of his physique, which are a key component of his inspirational power. A hero must be an icon, an ideal of aesthetic and physical perfection. This new design is far more aerodynamic. It will allow for a full range of motion while properly showcasing the heroic form. Aizawa felt a migraine beginning to form behind his eyes. He saw Cementos in the corner, deep in a hushed but intense conversation with ectoplasm. And I believe a foundation of reinforced concrete would be best, to symbolize his unshakable moral core. Cementos was saying, his blocky hands gesturing as if shaping a building. I'm thinking a prominent position in the main courtyard, at least 40 feet tall. A bronze statue of young Midoriya in his signature Delaware smash pose. It would serve as a permanent inspiration to all who pass through these hallowed halls. A fine idea. Ectoplasm's voice resonated from his mask. But is a static monument enough? I propose a more active form of support. An entire platoon of my clones could be assigned to him, running drills 24 hours a day, pushing him to his absolute limits. We could triple his rate of progress in a month. Snipe, polishing one of his revolvers nearby, nodded in agreement. And I'll set up overwatch positions on the rooftops surrounding the Heights Alliance. No threat will get within 500 yards of the asset. The boy's safety is paramount. The sheer, concentrated insanity of it all was staggering. These were the top pro heroes in the country, the educators of the next generation, and they were sitting here planning unauthorized statues, clone armies, and sniper nests for a first-year student. Power Loader was the only one who seemed to share Aizawa's sense of dread. He was slumped in a chair, his head in his hands, muttering. Neural interfaces. She wanted to install a neural interface. Enough. Aizawa's voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a razor. Everyone fell silent, turning to look at him. The collective force of their devoted gazes was almost enough to make him stagger. He activated his quirk again, the momentary clarity a precious shield. There is a situation, he said, his voice flat and cold. It involves a mind-altering quirk, and Izuku Midoriya is the target. Everything you are feeling right now, this overwhelming, unprofessional obsession, is a symptom. You are all compromised. A wave of denial and confusion rippled through the room. Whoa there, Eraser! Present Mike said, holding up his hands. Compromised? I just have a lot of school spirit for one of our star pupils. There's nothing wrong with that. My design is a logical and necessary upgrade to his hero gear. Midnight insisted, a defensive edge to her voice. Acknowledging greatness is not a symptom, it is a duty. Cementos stated simply. Aizawa saw it was useless. Their minds were already reframing the obsession, justifying it with their own personalities and logic. Trying to reason with them was like trying to explain color to a person born blind. He needed allies who could see. Mise's office. No. He barked at Power Loader, who scrambled to his feet with a grateful nod. As he turned to leave, he saw Hound Dog standing by the door, his posture rigid, his canine teeth bared in a silent snarl. His nostrils were flared, and his eyes were fixed on the center of the room as if staring at an invisible monster. Something's wrong. Hound Dog growled, his voice a guttural rumble that vibrated with primal instinct. The air, it stinks. Stinks of pack obsession. Unnatural. Everyone smells like they're fawning over an alpha, but it's twisted. Sickly sweet. It's wrong. Aizawa met the Hound Hero's gaze and saw the same clarity he felt only when using his quirk. You too. Mise's office. Hound Dog nodded, falling into step beside him. As they left the lounge, the cacophony of obsessive planning resumed behind them, a chilling testament to the scale of the problem. Principal Mise's office was an oasis of calm at the top of a tower of madness. The vast, panoramic window offered a god's eye view of the campus, and the room was filled with the gentle scent of freshly brewed tea. The principal himself, a picture of serene composure, sat behind his massive desk, pouring 4 cups with practiced, steady pause. Aizawa-kun, Hound Dog-kun, Power Loader-kun, he chirped, his beady black eyes gleaming with an unnerving intelligence. Thank you for coming. Earl Grey, I presume? Mizu, we have a massive problem, Aizawa said, foregoing any pleasantries. Midoriya was hit with an emotion-amplifying quirk. It's spreading through the student body and the faculty. The teacher's lounge is a disaster. Mizu took a slow, deliberate sip of his tea. Ah, yes. The aura of adoration. A rather poetic name for such a troublesome ability. The villain's name is Kensuke Hakamata. Quirk registered. low-level office worker with a history of social anxiety. It appears his desperate attempt to make his colleagues like him has had a rather explosive effect on a subject with a high degree of established, positive social connections. Aizawa stared at him. You already know, of course, Niza said with a cheerful smile that didn't reach his eyes. My brain, you see, is not like yours. While I can perceive the emotional pull of the quirk, it is, I must admit, a rather pleasant and insistent suggestion that I should allocate the entire school budget to young Midoriya's personal development. My high-spec thought processes flag it as a logical fallacy, a piece of corrupted data. I have been monitoring the escalating emotional contagion since yesterday afternoon. Power Loader sank into a chair, looking relieved. So you have a plan? Plans are already in motion, Niza confirmed. The police have Hakamata in a secure interrogation cell. The first priority is to understand the quirk's mechanics and, most importantly, its method of reversal. The second, more immediate priority, is to manage the primary catalyst of the on-campus chaos. He turned his gaze to Aizawa. We must protect Izuku Midoriya, both for his sake, and for the sake of institutional order. Aizawa's jaw tightened. This was his responsibility. His failure to act sooner had made it worse. I have a solution. We need to isolate him, remove the source of the aura, and the effect should, logically, diminish over time. There are shielded, subterranean training rooms designed to be impervious to sensory and emission-type quirks. If we place him in one of those, it should contain the effect. Hound Dog grunted in agreement. Get the prey out of the den. The pack will calm down. Niza steepled his tiny paws. A sound tactical decision, Aizawa-kun. However, obsession is not always logical. Removing the object of affection can often intensify the fixation, transforming it into paranoia and panic. But it is our most viable short-term option. See to it. I will coordinate with the police and begin the interrogation of Mr. Hakamata. Aizawa nodded, a grim sense of purpose settling over him. He had a mission. Find Midoriya. Explain the situation. Get him to safety. It was a clear, logical plan. He found Midoriya in a deserted hallway, huddled with Hitoshi Shinso. The sight of the general studies student, who looked wary but blessedly sane, was a small relief. Aizawa approached, his face grim. Midoriya. Shinso, he said, his voice clipped. There's been a development. I was wrong. You were right about the quirk. The look of pure, unadulterated relief on Midoriya's face was almost painful to witness. So you believe me? I do. Aizawa confirmed, the words a heavy admission of his own failure. And we have a plan to keep you safe. I'm taking you to a shielded room in the training basement. It will block your aura and protect you from the escalating attention of the student body. Midoriya nodded, his expression a mixture of terror and gratitude. He looked at Shinso, who gave him a subtle, encouraging nod. Okay, sensei. I understand. The journey to the basement was a tense, stealth operation. Aizawa led the way, his eyes scanning every corner, his senses on high alert. They managed to avoid the main thoroughfares, taking a series of service corridors and back stairwells. The few students they did pass stared at Midoriya with a hungry, desperate look in their eyes that made Aizawa's skin crawl. Finally, they reached their destination, a heavy, lead-line door marked Training Room Gamma 7. Aizawa keyed in a complex code, and the door hissed open, revealing a simple, sterile room. It was empty save for a single bench, the walls made of a dull, gray, quirk-dampening alloy. You'll be safe in here, Aizawa said, his voice softer than he intended. There are rations, water, and a basic cot in the supply closet. No one can get to you. I'll be posted outside. Nizu is working on a cure. Midoriya stepped inside, looking small and vulnerable in the stark, empty room. Thank you, sensei. Aizawa just nodded, unable to fully articulate the apology he owed his student. He sealed the heavy door, the sound of the locking mechanisms clicking into place echoing with a grim finality. He leaned against the cool metal, letting out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Step 1 was complete. The catalyst was contained. He was wrong. So catastrophically wrong. For the first hour, there was silence. Aizawa monitored the security feeds on a portable tablet. The campus seemed to be calming, the ambient emotional energy lessening. Perhaps his logic had been sound after all. Then, a single figure appeared at the far end of the long basement corridor. It was Ochako Uraraka. She was walking with a strange, aimless drift, her head cocked as if listening for a sound no one else could hear. Her eyes were unfocused, her expression lost. She stopped, her gaze fixing on the blank metal door of Gamma 7. A second figure appeared. Tenya Ida? He marched with his usual purpose, but his eyes held the same lost, searching quality. He joined Uraraka, standing before the door, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. Then came another. And another. It was like watching a pilgrimage of the damned. Shoto Todoroki arrived, a faint mist of condensation rising from his right side, his gaze locked on the door with an unnerving intensity. Momo Yayorozu and Kyokujiro appeared together, followed by a somber Fumikage Tokoemi, dark shadows swirling anxiously around him. Soon, all of Class 1A was there, a silent, unnerving crowd gathered in the sterile basement hallway. They didn't speak. They just stared at the door, their collective longing a palpable, suffocating force in the air. Then, the whispers began. "He's in there." Someone murmured. "Why is he locked away? Is he hurt?" "He needs us." The whispers grew louder, a wave of panicked, paranoid speculation. Their obsession, deprived of its source, wasn't fading. It was curdling into fear. Fear for him, and fear of him being taken from them. "They've taken him from us!" Mina Ashido cried, her voice cracking with anguish. "This is illogical!" Ida declared, his voice trembling. "Midoriya-kun's safety protocols require observation by his peers. He cannot be left in isolation." The situation escalated exponentially when the others began to arrive. Kendo and Tetsutetsu marched down the corridor with the grim determination of a rescue squad. Monoma followed, a wild look in his eyes, muttering about primary source material being sequestered. Support course students, general studies students, even a few upperclassmen began to file in, drawn by some invisible, emotional tether. The hallway was now packed, a dense, murmuring crowd of teenagers united by a single, irrational purpose. Aizawa stepped forward, placing himself between the crowd and the door. He activated his quirk, his floating hair and glowing eyes a clear warning. "Disperse." "No," he commanded, his voice a low growl. "This area is off limits. Midoriya is under school protection." His words had no effect. It was like trying to hold back the tide with a broom. "Protection?" Todoroki's voice was dangerously quiet, a cold flame in the charged atmosphere. "Or imprisonment?" "He needs our support. Let us through, Sensei. We have to make sure he's okay." Uraraka pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "We have a right to see him." The final, horrifying nail in the coffin was the arrival of his colleagues. President Mike strode into the hallway, his face a mask of frantic worry. Midnight was right behind him, her expression grimly determined. "Shota, what is the meaning of this?" Midnight demanded, her hands on her hips. "Why is my most promising protege being held in a bunker? The little listener could be scared in there." Mike added, his voice tight with anxiety. "We have to comfort him." Aizawa stood his ground, a lone bastion of sanity against the tide of his own brainwashed students and colleagues. The air was thick with their collective obsession, a physical pressure that made it hard to breathe. The warm, syrupy suggestion was screaming in his own head, telling him to open the door, to let them in, to join them. He fought it down, his knuckles white as he clenched his fists. The crowd took a collective step forward, their faces a terrifying mosaic of desperation, devotion, and paranoia. They weren't angry. They were terrified. Terrified of a world without their hero, and they would do anything to get him back. "Open the door, Sensei," Yayorozu said, her voice trembling but firm, a small cannon already beginning to form from her arm. "Please. Don't make us force you." Inside the sterile, gray box of training room Gamma 7, Izuku Midoriya was oblivious to the storm gathering outside his door. The quirk-dampening alloy of the walls worked both ways, shielding him from the outside world as much as it shielded the world from him. The silence was a profound, almost holy relief. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, he was not the center of anyone's universe. He was just a boy in a room, He sat on the cold metal bench, methodically unpacking the small survival kit Aizawa had pointed out. A bottle of water, a few nutrient bars, a thermal blanket. He took a sip of water, the cool liquid a small comfort in the suffocating anxiety that still clung to him. He could finally think. The insidious hum of the aura was gone, his mind blessedly his own. He paced the small room, the soft scuff of his sneakers the only sound. Okay, analyze, he thought, falling back on his most ingrained coping mechanism. The quirk amplifies positive emotions. Friendship, respect, rivalry, pride. It turns them into obsession. The strength of the effect seems proportional to the strength of the pre-existing bond. Bakugo's reaction was the most violent because our bond is the longest and most intense. All Might's was the most suffocating because his fatherly pride is so immense. He began to mutter, a low, rapid-fire stream of consciousness that he couldn't suppress. So, the primary danger isn't the emotion itself, but its logical conclusion. Protective instincts become possessiveness, admiration becomes worship. Rivalry becomes ownership. The quirk doesn't make them evil, it makes them irrational. Their core personalities are still there, just twisted. Yaoyorozu's generosity becomes a need to be the sole provider. Ida's discipline becomes a need to control my schedule. Hatsume's passion becomes that. He shuddered, pushing the memory of blueprint babies from his mind. A small security monitor was set into the wall near the door, a one-way feed showing the corridor outside. Aizawa had probably intended it as a reassurance, a way for him to see he was being protected. He walked over to it, expecting to see his teacher standing guard in an empty hallway. What he saw instead made his blood turn to ice. The hallway was a sea of faces. His classmates. His teachers. Students he barely knew. They were packed shoulder to shoulder, a silent, staring mob. Their collective gaze was fixed on his door, a unified expression of desperate, painful longing. And standing before them all was Aizawa-sensei, a lone, grim figure holding back the tide. Deku's breath hitched. This wasn't containment. This was a siege. His isolation hadn't calmed them down. It had made them frantic. He had become a holy relic locked in a vault, and they were the fanatical pilgrims demanding to see it. He watched, his heart hammering against his ribs, as the silent tension began to fray. The crowd was a living thing, breathing with a single, shared anxiety. It was a powder keg, and he could see the sparks beginning to fly. The kindness that had been so cloying and overwhelming was starting to curdle, the sweetness turning sour. Affection, when amplified to such an extreme, had no room for nuance. It had no room for sharing. The first crack appeared between two of the people he cared about most. Achiko Uraraka stood near the front, her face pale and streaked with tears. Her entire body was trembling, her hands clenched into tight fists at her sides. "He must be so scared in there," she whispered, her voice choked with a pain that was raw and absolute. "He always puts on a brave face, but he takes everything onto his own shoulders. He needs someone to tell him it's okay. He needs comfort." Beside her, Momo Yaoyorozu stood tall and regal, but her composure was a brittle facade. Her dark eyes, usually so calm and analytical, were filled with a frantic, possessive light. "Comfort is a temporary palliative," she stated, her voice sharp and cold, laced with an uncharacteristic condescension. "What Midoriya-sen truly requires is support. Tangible, logistical support. A strategic plan for his well-being, proper nutritional supplements, upgraded equipment. Your emotional platitudes are insufficient." Uraraka's head snapped towards her, her soft brown eyes flashing with a sudden, fierce fire. "Insufficient? Deku-kun isn't a machine, Yamamoto. He's a person. He has feelings. All your gadgets and schedules don't mean anything if he feels alone, and your well-meaning but ultimately empty sentimentality is a distraction from his mission," Yaoyorozu retorted, taking a step closer, her taller frame looming over Uraraka. "He needs a partner who can anticipate his tactical needs, not someone who will just float things for him. I understand his intellect. I understand what he requires to achieve greatness. Do you?" The insult, so petty and so cruel, hung in the air between them. It was a direct attack on Uraraka's motivations, on her very quirk. In any normal circumstance, Uraraka might have been hurt, but she would have brushed it off. But this wasn't a normal circumstance. Her adoration for Deku was a raging inferno, and Yaoyorozu's words were a splash of gasoline. You think you're better than me? Uraraka hissed, her voice dangerously low. The pads on her fingertips seemed to glow with a faint pink energy. You think your money and your fancy creations make you more important to him? He doesn't need your projects. He needs a friend. I am more than a friend. I am an asset, Yaoyorozu declared, her own skin beginning to shimmer as a tungsten rod started to form from her forearm. I am the support system he deserves. I can give him everything he needs. You can't give him what I can. Uraraka shrieked, her control finally snapping. She lunged forward, her hand outstretched, aiming for Yaoyorozu's arm. Aizawa moved, a black blur of motion. His capture weapon shot out, wrapping around Uraraka's waist and yanking her back before she could make contact. Stand down! Both of you! He snarled, his eyes glowing red. She started it! Uraraka sobbed, struggling against the bonds. Her emotional outburst was a threat to operational security. Yaoyorozu stated, the tungsten rod receding back into her arm as Aizawa's quirk flared. Before the conflict could escalate further, Tenya Ida strode between them, his hand chopping the air with a frantic, desperate energy. Cease this unseemly squabbling at once. Your personal feelings are irrelevant. He boomed, his voice echoing in the confined hallway. Deku felt a flicker of hope. Ida, the voice of reason. He would calm them down. Neither of you understands what Midoriya-kun truly requires. Ida continued, his glasses glinting. He does not need coddling, nor does he need gadgetry. What he needs is discipline. Structure. A rigorously enforced regimen of training and study. His friendship with me, based on mutual respect for rules and order, is the most stable and beneficial relationship for his development. I am his true partner in the pursuit of heroic perfection. Your chaotic emotions are a detriment to the mission. Deku's hope died a swift and brutal death. Ida hadn't intervened to restore order. He had intervened to declare his own perceived superiority. The harem was no longer a funny, abstract concept. It was a battlefield, and his friends were tearing each other apart to prove their worth to him. He watched, horrified, as other arguments began to break out in the crowd. Kirishima and Tetsu were engaged in a heated debate over whose hardening quirk provided a more manly and reliable defense for Deku. Mina Ashido and Toru Hagakure were shoving each other, arguing over who had a better understanding of his social and emotional needs. The kindness had shattered, and beneath it was a raw, ugly, ravenous jealousy. This was his fault. His quirk, his drive to connect with people, had become the fuel for their self-destruction. He pressed his hands against the cold glass of the monitor, his breath fogging the surface, a silent scream trapped in his throat. And then, the main event began. Katsuki Bakugo had been standing at the back of the crowd, a silent, smoldering volcano. His usual explosive rage was gone, replaced by something far more terrifying, a still, cold, predatory focus. His crimson eyes were fixed on the door, but he was listening to the arguments, the pathetic squabbles over who deserved Deku's attention. He heard Uraraka's tearful pleas, Yaoyorozu's arrogant declarations, Ida's pompous pronouncements. And with each word, the pressure inside him built. These extras. These insignificant side characters. They thought they had a claim. They thought their fleeting moments of friendship, their shared classroom experiences, put them on the same level as him. They knew nothing. They hadn't been there in the sandbox when Deku was a useless, quirkless crybaby who still tried to protect him. They hadn't been there to feel the sting of Deku's hand offered in pity after he fell in the creek. They hadn't spent 15 years locked in a suffocating, inextricable dance of rivalry, contempt, fear, and a microscopic, deeply buried shard of something that might have once been friendship. Their connection was a universe. Theirs was a footnote. He began to push his way through the crowd, shoving people aside with a brutal, single-minded purpose. Out of my way, he growled, the words a low rumble of thunder. Move! He reached the front of the mob just as Shoto Todoroki stepped forward, his expression serene and resolute. Todoroki had been watching the infighting with a detached, clinical air, as if observing a flawed experiment. He now turned his heterochromatic gaze on Aizawa. "Sensei," Todoroki said, his voice calm and even, a puff of cold mist escaping his lips. "Your logic is flawed. Isolating Midoriya is causing psychological distress to the collective. The most efficient solution is to allow a single, stable guardian to be with him. Someone who can regulate his environment and provide calm, unwavering support. I am the obvious choice." Before Aizawa could respond, Bakugo let out a harsh, grating laugh. "You!" he spat, the word dripping with contempt. "You think your daddy issues and your half-and-half light show make you stable? You're just as broken as the rest of these idiots." Todoroki's calm facade didn't crack, but the temperature in the hallway dropped by a noticeable 10 degrees. A thin layer of frost began to creep across the floor from his right foot. "My ability to control temperature is a tactical asset. Your uncontrolled explosions are a liability. Midoriya needs calm. He needs peace. You are noise." That single word, noise, was the spark that ignited the volcano. Bakugo's cold focus shattered, replaced by a radiant, incandescent fury. "Noise?" he roared, his hands already beginning to spark and crackle. "I'm the whetstone that sharpens him. I'm the storm that makes him stronger. You want to coddle him, to wrap him in a nice, safe little icebox so he never has to struggle. You want to make him weak." He took a step towards Todoroki, his body language screaming murder. "He doesn't belong to you, icy hot. He doesn't belong to any of you. His progress, his power, his very reason for fighting is tied to me. It has always been me. I was his first rival, and I will be his last. I am the only one worthy of standing by his side and the only one worthy of standing in his way." The air crackled with power, the ozone smell of Bakugo's nitroglycerin sweat mixing with the sharp, clean cold of Todoroki's ice. The other students scrambled back, clearing a space around the two powerhouses. This was no longer just an argument. "Your definition of strength is primitive," Todoroki stated, his voice dangerously soft. His left side began to emit a faint, shimmering heat. "You see him as a rival to be surpassed. I see him as a partner to be protected. Your motivation is selfish. Mine is for his benefit." "Benefit?" Bakugo howled with laughter. "You think you're helping him? You want to be his protector? His guardian? That's my job. I'm the only one who gets to beat him, and I'm the only one who gets to save him. Anyone else who tries is just getting in my damn way." And then he attacked. It wasn't a sparring move. There was no restraint. He lunged forward, his right hand blazing, unleashing a full-power AP shot directly at Todoroki's face. Todoroki reacted instantly, a massive, jagged wall of ice erupting from the floor to intercept the blast. The explosion shattered the front of the wall, sending shards of ice and superheated steam blasting through the corridor. The other students screamed, ducking for cover. Aizawa's eyes flared red. "Bakugo! Todoroki! Stand down! That is an order!" But they weren't listening. They were locked in their own world, a bubble of obsessive, violent conflict. The quirk had stripped away their heroic restraint, their teamwork, their friendship, and left only the raw, possessive core of their feelings for Deku. This wasn't about becoming the #1 hero anymore. This was a primal, territorial battle over who had the ultimate claim to Izuku Midoriya. "You've always been jealous," Todoroki said, his voice echoing from behind the remnants of his ice wall. A wave of ice, like a frozen tidal wave, surged across the floor towards Bakugo. "You see his light, and you resent that it's not yours. I don't want his light, you half-and-half bastard!" Bakugo roared, propelling himself into the air with a series of controlled explosions to evade the ice. He spun in midair, his hands glowing like twin suns. "I want to be the one who makes it shine brighter when I crush it." Howitzer impact! A massive, swirling vortex of explosive energy erupted from his hands, a tornado of fire and concussive force that tore through the hallway. Todoroki met it head-on, his entire left side bursting into a roaring column of flame. Boom! The clash of fire and explosion was deafening. The shockwave blew out the lights, plunging the corridor into a flickering chaos of emergency strobes. The sprinkler systems activated, dousing everyone in a shower of cold, grimy water. The very foundations of the building seemed to groan in protest. Through the screen, Deku watched it all. He saw his friends, his two most powerful, most complicated friends, trying to genuinely, seriously maim each other. Todoroki's ice, sharp and lethal. Bakugo's explosions, aimed not to incapacitate but to obliterate. And it was all because of him. The weight of it was crushing, a physical pressure on his chest that stole his breath. This wasn't heroism. This was madness. A madness he had caused. Tears streamed down his face, mixing with the sweat of his own panic. He pounded his fist against the unyielding alloy of the door, the impact a dull, pathetic thud. "Stop it!" he whispered, his voice breaking. "Please stop it!" He was supposed to be a hero. He was supposed to save people. But he wasn't a savior. He was a plague. He was a trigger, a catalyst for the worst, most destructive impulses of the people he loved. His greatest strength, his ability to inspire others, to form deep, meaningful connections, had been twisted into a weapon of mass destruction. On the screen, the fight raged on. Aizawa was trying to intervene, his capture weapon lashing out, but he was forced to focus on protecting the other students from the crossfire. The basement corridor was being systematically destroyed, the walls cracking, pipes bursting, the floor a treacherous mixture of ice and scorch marks. Deku sank to the floor, his legs giving out from under him. He wrapped his arms around himself, trying to hold himself together as his world shattered on the other side of the door. The silence of his room was no longer a comfort. It was a tomb. He was locked away, helpless, forced to bear witness to the nightmare he had created. He had never, in his entire life, not when he was a quirkless child being bullied, not when he faced the Noma, not when he fought Muscular or Overhaul, felt so utterly and completely alone. The adoration of an entire school was focused on him, and he was drowning in the most profound isolation he had ever known. His friends were fighting for him, and all he felt was the crushing, unbearable weight of their devotion.